The broken convoy drifted slowly at the edge of Sol space. The ships were old, cracked, and barely flying. Panels hung loose, lights flickered, and engines hummed with a weak sound that showed how close they were to shutting down forever. Inside those ships lived the Naliri, a tired and frightened alien species who had lost their place in the galaxy. They had been pushed away from world after world. They were blamed for a war they did not start, and the galaxy had not cared to listen to their side of the story. All they could do now was run, searching for a place where they might survive. On the command deck of the small Earth observation outpost that watched the outer region of Sol space, a young officer named Evan Brooks stared at the incoming signal. His screen showed the weak distress call repeating again and again. He listened closely, leaning forward with a serious expression. At first, he thought it might be pirates pretending to be refugees, but when the scanners showed broken engines, nearly empty energy cells, and life support systems on the edge of collapse, he realized it was real. Evan called out to the others on the outpost. His small team gathered around him. A quiet man named Ryan Hale read the translation slowly, while a calm technician named Holly Rivera worked the scanners. The signal was rough, but it held a simple message. Help us. Please. Evan had heard many distress calls before, but something about this one made him feel a deep pull inside. He contacted Earth Command and reported exactly what they found. He expected Earth to say no, because the galaxy was becoming more dangerous every year. Many alien species warned that taking in unwanted outsiders might bring trouble to Earth, but Evan felt strongly that they could not ignore the Naliri. Far away on Earth, Director Laura Price listened to his report. She sat in a bright room filled with advisors and screens. Her gray hair was tied back in a simple way, and her eyes were sharp with thought. She asked for every detail and watched the images of the damaged vessels. She looked at the pale faces of the Naliri, who appeared briefly on the visual feed. They looked thin, weak, and scared. Many were sitting in dim corners with blankets around them. Some were bandaged, some were holding children, even though many officers in the room argued against it. Director Price stood up and spoke firmly. She said that Earth had suffered during its past, and humans knew what it was like to be judged unfairly. They knew what it meant to stand alone while stronger powers pushed them aside. She said Earth had a duty to help, especially when no one else would. After a long meeting, Earth Command agreed. They allowed the Naliri convoy to enter Sol space, but only under escort. Evan received the approval quickly. The moment the message reached him, he let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. He opened the channel to the Naliri leader, a woman named Iara Vel. Her face appeared on the screen. Her skin had a soft blue glow, but her eyes were tired. She looked at Evan with surprise. She said she thought the humans would refuse them or give a warning to leave immediately. But instead, Evan told her they were sending help. He told her the humans would guide them to Luna Station, where they could repair their ships and rest safely. Iara lowered her head for a moment, trying to control her emotions. She thanked him in a quiet voice that trembled. She said her people had not heard kindness in a long time. Evan felt something heavy in his chest. He wanted to say more, but his voice caught. All he managed was a small nod. Human rescue ships reached the Naliri convoy within hours. The ships were not large or fancy, but they were sturdy and well-built. Their white lights shined clearly through the dark space. The Naliri watched them with nervous hope. Some hid, some peeked from behind broken panels. But when the humans began connecting cables and stabilizing airlocks, the Naliri realized the help was sincere. On the lead rescue ship, Sean Miller worked with his usual focus. He pulled heavy cables, checked pressure seals, and made sure the airlocks would hold. Holly Rivera joined him, her hands moving quickly as she checked readings on her tablet. She spoke calmly to the Naliri engineers, guiding them through steps. Even though the Naliri looked very different from humans, communication flowed smoothly through the translator devices. Sean noticed a Naliri child staring at him with wide eyes. She was holding onto the hand of an older Naliri man. Sean crouched down and gave her a soft smile. The child hesitated, then smiled back. Her small glow brightened for a moment. Sean felt warmth fill his chest. He thought about how strange the galaxy was becoming, but also how simple moments like this made everything feel worth it. On another ship, Ryan helped move injured Naliri onto stretchers. Some were dehydrated. Some had breathing issues. And some had old wounds from their escape. Human medics worked side by side with Naliri caretakers. At first, both sides moved slowly, unsure of one another. But soon, the work became natural. Whenever a Naliri medic struggled with heavy equipment, a human medic stepped in to help, and when a human could not understand a Naliri medical tool, a Naliri explained it with careful gestures. Evan watched the rescue operation from the outpost control room. His eyes followed every update on the screen. When he saw the first group of Naliri step safely into the human ships, he felt relief spread through him. He sent messages to all rescue workers, thanking them for their effort. The team responded with tired smiles and waves. After several hours of careful work, the human ships formed an escort around the convoy and began moving toward Luna Station. The Naliri ships wobbled, but held together thanks to the repairs. Iara Vel stood on her bridge, with a blanket around her shoulders. She watched the human ships guide her people with steady confidence. For the first time in many cycles, she allowed herself to believe things might get better. As the convoy approached the moon, the bright shimmer of Luna Station came into view. The station glowed softly with blue lights. It was a place of peace and cooperation, filled with humans who studied the stars and worked together to build Earth's future. When the Naliri saw it, many whispered among themselves. Some cried quietly. Others placed their hands on the view screens, as if touching the site would make it more real. The docking process was long and careful. Human engineers lined up one by one to help the Naliri board. When the first group stepped onto Luna Station, they looked around with nervous wonder. The air smelled clean. The walls were bright. Humans greeted them with soft voices, guiding them to resting areas. Evan traveled from the outpost to Luna Station to meet them himself. When he arrived, he saw Iara standing at the entrance, looking at everything with a mixture of caution and hope. She turned when she heard him walking toward her. Evan gave her a friendly nod. She placed a hand on her chest, a gesture of respect in her culture. He told her that her people were safe now. Iara looked into his eyes and said she believed him. She said she could feel honest care from the humans, something the galaxy had denied them again and again. Evan told her that humans understood what it felt like to struggle. Their own history was filled with difficult times, mistakes, and slow healing. He said Earth had learned the value of offering shelter to those who needed it. Iara listened closely. She then spoke about the journey her people had endured. She said they had been pushed away from every world they tried to approach. She said many of her people had lost hope. She admitted she had almost given up as well. But when the humans responded with kindness, it gave her strength again. As more Naliri entered the station, children looked around with curiosity. They touched the walls, stared at the machines, and studied the lights. Human volunteers set up warm food and clean water in a large hall. Doctors waited to check for injuries. Translators walked through the crowd to help with communication. When a small Naliri boy approached Evan and tugged on his sleeve, Evan knelt down. The boy asked in a quiet voice if humans would send them away later. Evan shook his head. He said Earth offered shelter, not a temporary hiding place. He said the Naliri were not guests for a day but people who deserved safety for as long as they needed it. The boy smiled, relieved. Meanwhile, Director Price arrived on the station as well. She walked through the hall and greeted the Naliri with calm respect. Iara met her with deep gratitude. Director Price told her that Earth would stand with them, even if the galaxy disagreed. Iara looked startled. She had never heard such confidence from another species before. Slowly, the Naliri began to settle into their temporary living spaces. Human engineers checked their ships and started preparing detailed repair plans. Medical teams worked late into the night to treat the injured. Volunteers brought blankets, simple clothes, and warm food. As the first day came to a close, the Naliri felt something they had not felt in a long time. They felt safe. Some slept deeply for the first time in many cycles. Some sat quietly and watched the humans move around them, filling the station with gentle voices. Evan stood on a balcony overlooking the hall. He watched humans and Naliri sitting together, talking slowly, sharing quiet smiles. He felt proud of Earth. He felt proud of the choice humanity had made, and deep inside, he sensed something important had begun. Humanity had opened its arms to a species the galaxy had rejected. The path ahead would not be easy, but in this moment, surrounded by tired refugees and kind humans, Evan believed Earth had taken the first step towards something greater, something that might change more than just the lives of the Naliri. It might change the future of the entire galaxy. The days passed slowly on Luna Station. The Naliri began to feel the difference in being treated with care. For the first time in many cycles, they were not afraid to walk openly, to ask questions, or to laugh quietly. Children ran through the halls, their small, glowing forms weaving between human volunteers carrying food or supplies. Adults worked alongside humans, learning how to repair their ships, how to manage life support systems, and even how to grow small gardens in the station's green areas. Evan Brooks spent most of his time with the Naliri, helping them adjust to human customs and life on the station. He taught them simple things at first: how to communicate with humans, how to move safely around the station, how to use the medical facilities if they were sick. Iyara Vel, the Naliri leader, worked closely with him. She was a strong and careful leader, always considering the feelings of her people. She watched every interaction, making sure her people understood that humans were friends, not enemies. Slowly, she began to trust Evan and the humans more. Some Naliri were still hesitant. They had spent decades running from one galaxy to another. Every new place had ended in rejection or violence. But here, on Luna Station, no one shouted at them. No one asked them to leave. Humans gave them blankets, food, and words of comfort. Even the small things mattered. When a young Naliri girl named Selah dropped her tray in the dining hall, a human named Holly Rivera picked it up and smiled at her. Selah blinked at the kind gesture, and for the first time, she laughed freely. That laughter echoed in the hall, bringing smiles to both humans and Naliri alike. Evan noticed that the Naliri children were learning quickly. They picked up human words fast and began to play simple games with human children in the station's recreation area. It was a small miracle, considering how long they had been on the run, always hiding, always afraid. He watched Iyara observe the children one afternoon, her glowing eyes soft with hope. She whispered to herself that perhaps this was the beginning of something new for her people. Perhaps Earth could truly be a home. Not everything was easy. The Naliri ships still needed heavy repairs. The engines were damaged, the hulls cracked, and some systems had stopped working completely. Human engineers, like Sean Miller, worked long hours to fix the ships. They taught Naliri engineers human methods and asked the Naliri to share their knowledge too. Sometimes, frustration built on both sides. The Naliri were not used to human ways of doing things, and humans could not always understand Naliri technology. But through patient work and repeated attempts, solutions were found. Each fixed ship became a symbol of cooperation, proof that two very different species could work together. Meanwhile, outside the station, news of Earth's decision to shelter the Naliri began to reach other species in the galaxy. Some sent messages of curiosity, others of warning. A coalition of alien governments, led by a species called the Vareli, sent a formal complaint. They demanded that Earth hand over the Naliri, accusing them of harboring fugitives. Their tone was sharp, threatening, and arrogant. They assumed humanity would be too weak or too afraid to resist. Director Laura Price received the message in her office. She read it carefully, noting each threat and demand. She did not flinch. She understood that some species might see humans as small and inexperienced. But she also knew that humanity had survived death worlds, wars, and countless challenges. The Vareli were wrong to assume fear. Earth had a principle. No innocent being would be turned away to face harm. She drafted a reply, clear and firm. She said that Earth would not surrender the Naliri, and that the decision was final. Iaravel heard about the message from the Varelli when she was in the station's conference room. She looked worried, turning to Evan for reassurance. Evan placed a hand gently on her shoulder and said that humans had faced similar threats before. He reminded her that Earth had learned to survive against greater powers and that the Naliri were not alone anymore. Iara nodded slowly, but worry did not leave her completely. She had been betrayed too many times in the galaxy to feel completely safe yet. Evan suggested a small cultural exchange to help the Naliri feel more comfortable. Human volunteers, engineers, and children worked with Naliri families to set up areas where they could cook their food, play their games, and tell stories from their home world. Naliri elders, who had rarely spoken since the exile began sharing their history, their traditions, and their songs. Humans listened carefully, learning new ways of thinking, new ways of seeing the stars. It was a quiet, slow blending of cultures, but it gave the Naliri hope. They began to imagine a life where they were not constantly running, where they could plan for the future, where they could rebuild what they had lost. Some Naliri, however, struggled to trust completely. Iara spent many nights talking to them, explaining that the humans meant no harm. She reminded them that humanity had a history of survival on a harsh planet. Earth's people had faced extinction, environmental disasters, and countless wars, yet they had learned compassion and strength. Iara tried to show her people that they could take this lesson to heart. Slowly, fear began to fade, replaced with cautious hope. Even as the Naliri began to settle, the threat of the coalition lingered. Ships from the Varelli and their allies appeared at the edges of Sol space, monitoring Earth's movements. They tested boundaries, sending small patrols near Luna Station. The humans noticed immediately. Captain Lena Brooks, Evan's older sister and commander of one of Earth's defense ships, coordinated with Luna Station to track the patrols. She reported back to Director Price, who remained calm. The humans had technology, strategy, and the courage to defend themselves and those under their care. Iara watched the patrols nervously. She asked Evan if the humans would fight if necessary. He told her they would defend the Naliri. But he also explained that Earth preferred to resolve conflicts with words first. Iara realized that this combination of courage and diplomacy was something she had rarely seen in other species. The humans were strong, but they did not act recklessly. They measured, they considered, and then they acted. It was a kind of strength that inspired trust. The first week passed quietly, giving everyone a chance to settle into routines. Naliri families learned where to find clean water, where to rest, and where to eat. Children began learning human words alongside their own language. Adults studied engineering, medicine, and agriculture. Human volunteers guided them patiently, answering questions again and again. Slowly, Luna Station began to feel like a home, not just a temporary shelter. As the days grew into weeks, the Naliri began to contribute more actively. Iara encouraged her people to share skills and knowledge they had brought from their homeworld. Some had experience in starship mechanics, others in medical sciences, and a few had ways of cultivating food in limited space. Humans listened and learned. The Naliri found that cooperation was not just a way to survive, it was a way to thrive. Small innovations in food storage, power use, and life support began to emerge, showing that together, two species could accomplish more than either could alone. One afternoon, Evan walked through the gardens of Luna Station, watching children play. He noticed Iara sitting on a bench nearby, quietly speaking with a human teacher named Grace Thompson. They discussed the lessons of the day, the children's progress, and the small joys that came from learning and sharing. Iara smiled softly, her glowing skin reflecting the sunlight streaming in from the station's viewports. Evan felt hope swell inside him. These small moments of trust and connection mattered more than any political statement or military plan. They were the foundation of something lasting. Meanwhile, the coalition's pressure increased. Messages became more demanding. Their tone grew sharper, implying threats of economic sanctions, trade restrictions, and even military action. Humans monitored the situation carefully. Earth Command held meetings, discussed strategies, and prepared defenses. But the humans never wavered. Director Price made it clear that no innocent species would be turned over to harm. Her position was firm, unwavering. For the Naliri, this was a lesson they had not learned in cycles. Earth would not abandon them. Iara called a meeting of her people in the main hall of the station. She spoke quietly but firmly, telling them to continue their work, to keep learning, and to trust that humanity's promise was real. Some Naliri still hesitated, fearing that humans might be forced to surrender them. Iara reminded them that they were not alone, that humans had a history of protecting those in need. Slowly, the faces around her softened. Fear remained, but courage began to grow alongside it. As the weeks continued, small celebrations began on Luna Station. Naliri children and humans shared games, food, and stories from their homes. They painted murals together, showing scenes from Earth and from the Naliri homeworld. Music filled the halls as humans learned Naliri songs, and Naliri learned human ones. Every day, trust grew stronger. What had begun as a temporary shelter was now a community. Through all of this, Evan and Iara worked closely, building not only friendship but also understanding between their species. They studied star charts together, planned projects to repair ships, and organized educational programs for the Naliri. They even began discussing long-term plans, imagining a future where Naliri could travel freely, with Earth's support and guidance. The station was no longer just a refuge. It was becoming a place where life could grow again. Even as the coalition watched from afar, they saw the human determination and the Naliri's growing strength. They realized that Earth was not easily intimidated. The bond forming between humans and Naliri was strong and deep, built on care, shared struggle, and respect. The coalition had underestimated humanity's willingness to stand for what was right. They also did not fully understand the meaning of a safe home for those who had been cast out. One evening, as the station's lights dimmed for the rest period, Iara stood on a balcony overlooking the gardens. She watched the children play, humans and Naliri together, laughing without fear. She whispered to Evan that she had never imagined anything like this. For the first time in her life, she felt the possibility of peace. The Naliri had found shelter, not just in a physical place, but in the hearts of humans. And that, she realized, was something no force in the galaxy could easily destroy. The days ahead were uncertain. The coalition could return with larger forces. Challenges would come. But for now, the Naliri learned to hope. They began to believe in a life where they were no longer fugitives, where they could contribute, learn, and grow. And in this small, quiet place called Luna Station, humanity showed them that even in a galaxy that rejected them, there was a home ready to embrace them. The quiet days on Luna Station were not meant to last. Far beyond Sol space, the coalition of alien governments had grown impatient. They could not accept that Earth had given shelter to the Naliri, a species they had already judged and condemned. They gathered a fleet, powerful and sharp, sending it toward the human system with the clear message that the Naliri must be handed over, or war would follow. The humans on Luna Station noticed the movement almost immediately. Captain Lena Brooks, who commanded one of the Earth defense ships, reported the incoming fleet to Director Laura Price. She spoke calmly, her voice steady, but her eyes showed the seriousness of the situation. "They are approaching fast," she said. "They expect us to be afraid. They expect us to surrender." Director Price looked at her team and nodded slowly. She did not raise her voice. She had studied humanity's past, known its hardships, and understood its resilience. She knew the galaxy had underestimated humans before, and she would not let it happen again. "Earth does not abandon those in need," she said. "We will protect the Naliri. We will stand firm." On Luna Station, Iara Vel gathered her people. She could feel the fear in their hearts. The Naliri had spent decades running from the galaxy's judgment. They had seen hope crushed more times than they could count. Some whispered that perhaps they should leave again, to save the humans from trouble. Iyara shook her head. She knew the humans would not abandon them, and she knew they had a chance to stand tall together. Evan Brooks was at her side. He spoke softly to the crowd, his voice carrying calm and reassurance. "You are safe," he said. "We will not let anyone hurt you. The humans and the Naliri will face this together." Some of the Naliri still doubted, but the sound of his steady voice gave them courage. The coalition fleet entered the system with a show of power. Their ships were larger and faster. Weapons pointed toward the humans. They expected panic. They expected submission. What they did not expect was humanity's quiet strength. Earth defense ships lined the orbit of Luna Station, ready to respond if needed. But the humans did not attack first. They wanted to negotiate. They wanted to show the galaxy that fear and violence were not the only paths. Iyara watched from the station's observation deck. The glowing hulls of the coalition ships reflected in her eyes. She felt her chest tighten, fear pressing against her courage. Evan placed a hand on her shoulder, and she felt a steady warmth that reminded her that they were not alone. She whispered to him, "Do you think they will leave us alone?" Evan shook his head slowly. "They will not," he said. "But Earth has something they do not understand. Strength is not always in weapons. Sometimes, it is in the will to protect the innocent." Messages were sent to the coalition. Director Price's words were firm but careful. She explained that the Naliri had been unfairly judged and that Earth would not surrender them. She reminded the coalition that attacking a human world would not be simple. Humanity had survived countless disasters, had defended itself against more dangerous threats, and would not bow to intimidation. The coalition fleet hesitated. Their commanders spoke among themselves, trying to decide the next step. They assumed the humans would break under pressure, that fear would make them surrender the Naliri, but they were wrong. Inside Luna Station, preparations continued. Humans and Naliri worked side by side, checking defenses and emergency protocols. Engineers made sure the station's systems could withstand sudden attacks. Medics prepared for possible casualties, even though everyone hoped they would not be needed. The Naliri learned quickly, assisting where they could. They realized that they were not helpless, that they could contribute to their own protection, and that their skills mattered. Evan and Iyara met in a quiet room away from the crowds. They planned how to help the Naliri stay safe if things escalated. They discussed evacuation routes, safe zones, and communication systems. They spoke openly, sharing fears and hopes. Iyara admitted she had never imagined that any species would defend the Naliri so strongly. Evan smiled softly. "Humans know what it feels like to be judged unfairly," he said. "We know what it means to fight for someone who cannot defend themselves. That is why we will not leave you." As the hours passed, the coalition commanders made their final decision. They sent a direct message to Director Price, demanding the Naliri be handed over immediately or face destruction. Director Price read the message and then spoke calmly to the council aboard Luna Station. "Earth will not surrender the innocent. You may attack if you wish, but we will protect those under our care." The words shocked the Naliri. They had never heard such a declaration from another species. Fear remained, but hope grew. For the first time, they saw that humans truly meant what they said. When the coalition fleet moved closer, the humans did not wait. They activated shields around Luna Station and deployed defense ships in a careful formation. Captain Lena Brooks commanded the fleet with precision, moving ships to cover the station while keeping communication lines open. Humans were ready to fight, but they still sought a peaceful solution. Iyara stood on the observation deck with Evan, watching the distant ships. The tension was high, but something in the humans' calm, deliberate actions inspired courage. "They will not hurt us," she said, trying to convince herself as much as the Naliri around her. Suddenly, a transmission from the Naliri Elder Council reached the coalition fleet. They broadcast evidence that proved the Naliri had been framed for the war they were accused of. The records showed the truth. The Naliri had tried to mediate and had acted to save lives. The coalition fleet hesitated, unsure how to respond. Director Price and Evan worked quickly to amplify the message to neutral species across nearby systems. They showed the evidence to everyone who would listen, demonstrating that the Naliri were innocent and that Earth had acted morally. Small messages of support arrived from other species who had witnessed the injustices against the Naliri. The coalition began to lose face. Their threats now seemed hollow in the eyes of the galaxy. Inside Luna Station, the Naliri watched carefully. Iara explained that their future was in their own hands, strengthened by the humans who had chosen to protect them. The Naliri began to realize that Earth was not just a shelter but a place where truth mattered, where courage mattered, where the innocent could find justice. After hours of tension, the coalition fleet finally began to retreat. Their commanders realized they could not justify an attack without losing credibility across the galaxy. The humans had not fired a single shot, but their determination and strategy had been enough to protect the Naliri. Joy swept through Luna Station. Naliri children ran through the halls laughing. Adults hugged one another, tears in their eyes. Iara Vel thanked Evan and the humans. "You saved us," she said softly, her voice full of emotion. "You gave us life again." Evan smiled and shook his head. "You saved yourselves," he said. "We only gave you a place to stand." In the days that followed, the Naliri began to settle into a new rhythm. Some chose to remain on Luna Station, working alongside humans to repair their ships and build permanent homes. Others began planning journeys to explore the galaxy again, carrying the story of humanity's courage and compassion with them. The Naliri realized that they were not alone, and that kindness and protection were not weaknesses but strengths. Small celebrations began on the station. Humans and Naliri shared meals, stories, and games. Children of both species played together, learning new words and laughter. Elder Naliri shared songs from their homeworld, while humans taught their own music and stories. Slowly, a new culture was forming, one that combined the best of both species. Iara and Evan worked closely to ensure the Naliri were fully integrated into life on Luna Station. They planned educational programs, shared technology, and even began discussing the possibility of new colonies with human support. The Naliri were no longer refugees, they were partners, students, teachers, and friends. Even the coalition fleet, watching from afar, began to understand that Earth's people were not to be underestimated. Humans had shown courage, intelligence, and compassion in equal measure. They had protected the innocent without resorting to unnecessary violence, and the galaxy had noticed. The story of Earth's defense of the Naliri spread quickly, inspiring others to reconsider how they treated outcasts and refugees. Evan often walked through the gardens on Luna Station, watching humans and Naliri work side by side. Iara joined him sometimes, and together they watched children play under the soft glow of the station lights. She said quietly, "I never imagined this could be possible. We were so lost, and yet, here we are." Evan nodded. "Sometimes," he said, "all it takes is someone to open their arms. Then the rest follows." The Naliri knew that challenges would come in the future. Some species might still fear them, and some might still hold grudges. But now, they had learned something they had never known before. There were worlds and people who would fight for what was right, who would protect the innocent no matter the cost. Earth had given them not only shelter but also hope. As months passed, the Naliri integrated more fully into station life. Humans taught them skills, helped them repair their ships, and guided them in building a sustainable life. The Naliri, in turn, shared their knowledge of the stars, of technology, and of survival in harsh environments. Together, the two species created something new, something neither could have built alone. Finally, Iara stood before a small group of humans and Naliri in the station's main hall. She spoke quietly but firmly, thanking everyone for their courage and kindness. She said that the Naliri would never forget what Earth had done, that they would carry the story of this shelter and protection to every corner of the galaxy. Evan watched her speak, pride swelling in his chest. Humanity had faced fear, danger, and threats from greater powers. They had chosen compassion over cowardice, courage over hesitation. And because of that choice, a species once cast out now had a home and a future. The Naliri children ran past him, laughing and glowing softly in the station's light. Adults worked quietly, smiling at one another as they repaired ships or learned new skills. Iyara joined Evan on the observation balcony, and together they watched the stars stretch endlessly beyond Luna Station. Iyara whispered, "The galaxy will remember this." Evan nodded. "Not because of power," he said, "but because of what we chose to do when it mattered." The Naliri had been banished by the galaxy, rejected and hunted. But Earth had opened its arms. And in doing so, humanity had changed the lives of an entire species. What began as shelter became hope. What began as protection became trust. And what began as kindness became a bond that could not be broken. For the first time in many cycles, the Naliri felt safe, proud, and alive. And as they looked toward the stars, they knew they would never forget the planet that had given them a home when no one else would.